welcome back, everyone. This session will be leveraging the authority of labels to align design with diverse audiences, presented by Dr. Kiersten Thamm. Just a reminder that throughout the presentation, you're welcome to add questions into the chat using Q at the front, and we'll compile those to ask at the end. And Kiersten, you're ready to go.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm going to do the obligatory question. Can everyone see my screen okay? And I would love an auditory response because I can't actually see the chat or...
Yes, you're great, Kiersten.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Yeah, wonderful. So yeah, like Meredith said, I'm Kiersten Thamm. I use the pronoun she, her, and I am dialing in from the office corner of my home in Berlin, Germany. So I like that we have a little European contingent going on. I'm also the collections curator at a museum called the Museum of 21st Century Design. It's a very new museum. It's founded in 2021, so just a few years ago, and it's based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Yeah, and before I dive in, I really want to say thank you. We've only been together for a few hours, but I've already learned a lot, had a lot of ideas, a lot of epiphanies, I would say. And that's especially important to me as a member of a young organization, but also someone who's pretty new to the topic of labels. So yeah, I'm really eager to see what else this week brings, and I hope you will take what I present today as a work in progress. I think, like Alex just said really well, maintaining this ability to be nimble and to continue growing and changing, because of course the world and our context changes, but we also as institutions and individuals change. So with that, thank you everyone who's presented, thanks to the organizations, and thanks to my colleagues who have input not only to this paper, but to the labels we're going to talk about. All right, so let's dive in. Okay, so I think, as most of us can agree, conventional labels in art museums across Europe and North America have, at least over the past couple of decades, represented canonical and rather problematical ideas of author and place. They typically privilege a single individual and a specific moment in time of the designed objects. So we see typically one name, one place, one date of creation, and perhaps a few sentences of visual description or author biography. This framework reflects the dominance of paintings and the idea of the auteur, which connotations of authority endowed by generations of performative objectivity protect. This approach to labels and description barely intersects with the majority of people that the Museum of 21st Century Design aims to engage. And the museum, as you see on the screen, is referred to M21D, experiments with this juxtaposition of influence and disinterest to reimagine labels as part of a larger project to engage an expansive community in creating a better future. So this case study that I'm presenting today is going to walk us through this framework for labels that we've been using. And we're going to look at 3 labels to do that. One label for a digital campaign that educates readers on early signs of breast cancer, one label for the Warwick Junction in Durban, South Africa, and a label for a menstrual cup. I hope that by looking at disparate examples of design highlights how M21D navigates this tension of integrating unruly information, the authority of the label itself, and the need for clear and compelling communication. So I'm going to take a moment and talk a little bit about M21D because it's important to the label conversation. You see there's a QR code on the screen, so if you want to check out what we're up to, you can do that quite easily. And if for some reason the QR code doesn't work, you can always just Google us. So M21D uses the position of museums to research, promote, and normalize design that positively impacts the environment and encourages a more equal society in every form that's possible. It forgoes a permanent building to invest in temporary exhibitions in surprising locations, interventions into other museum collections, and other collaborative activities. Ongoing M21D projects include an exhibition at the storage depot of the Museum Boijmans in Rotterdam, an annual lecture series in New York about reparative design, a global fellowship program for recent MA graduates, and an online exhibition about life around the metro cable in Medellin, Colombia, based on the work completed by a partner research team. So the organization basically is just looking for cracks it can fill and align efforts it can support within the landscape of art and design institutions. And as part of that mission, the museum publishes a digital study collection. I want to emphasize that we don't maintain a physical collection. We research and we write about design without acquiring or storing them. One, because we don't want to increase our own carbon footprint by starting a formal collection. And as we'll see, some of the designs in our collection have complicated physical forms. It's quite hard to figure out how to accession a digital entity, as some museums are really trying to figure out how to do. And so we'll look at that. But this kind of arrangement, this setup really gives us the luxury to start from scratch, to reimagine labels and documentation, and to take up as much digital space as possible. So we craft public digital files that attempt to answer questions about how design impacts people and places, because we know that's what our visitors care most about. We know this from, of course, anecdotal evidence, just chatting with folks, but also quantifiable data, thanks to the deluge of surveys the EU and other institutions do every year in the area. So for example, the majority of the 3,000 people who visited M21D in 2022 used computers or cell phones in the Netherlands, where 96% of citizens believe that protecting the environment is essential to them. And 91% of citizens believe that climate change is a severe problem in the EU. Ipsos European Public Affairs reported in 2021 that the primary concern of more than the 20,000 Dutch citizens surveyed was combating climate change, followed closely by tackling poverty and inequality. So this dual concern rose up along with other social issues, including tackling financial corruption, ending terrorism, dealing with the challenges of immigration, and tackling the rise of extremism. So these concerns obviously make writing labels a little bit more difficult than concerns about names and dates. But nevertheless, M21D attempts to do so by conversationally describing several moments in a design's life cycle, acknowledging gaps and inviting contributions from visitors. Labels begin with materials involved in the design, followed by how people interact with those materials, and the economic and political systems controlling their working conditions. How the design has been used, who can afford the finished product, how that product functions and encourages society to interact, and the overall impact of a product on the environment, right? All the way from creation to destruction are also attempted to be described. Because the collection is gradually growing, it's a gradually growing steady collection with comprehensive labels. We do have many gaps, but M21 endeavors to turn these gaps into conversation points, asking visitors for their experience on use histories and being transparent about ongoing research processes. Thinking about labels not as complete sets of information, but as tools to encourage curiosity helps to expand the potential of those labels. So M21D aims to use them to be conversational, transparent, and open to external perspectives. So that's our framework. And let's see what one actually looks like. So again, you can read along with me on the screen. You can see an example of one of our labels, but you can also read it more easily if you scan the QR code. So we'll start by looking at this label for the Cancerfonden education campaign. And I'm going to quickly read through it so we can all be on the same page. So it says materials, digital images, videos, online ads, and the electrical and computer infrastructure that powers and displays them. The labor. Well, we know that while people in Sweden generally enjoy a high quality life, more research is needed into the specific situation of those at Cancerfonden, which is the Swedish Cancer Society. Creators. So instead of choosing just one name, we try to do something a bit more descriptive. So people working together within the Swedish Cancer Society, and all those working in the digital chain of technologies that make those materials possible. The uses educational resources to help people independently identify possible indicators of breast cancer. Access. The campaign is now available to anyone with internet access and awareness of it. The figures in the campaign demonstrate how to do a breast exam in an easy to understand way. The text in the video is only available in Swedish. Previously, Facebook censored the campaign for so-called sexual content. In response to this censorship, Cancerfonden released additional resources about breast cancer and the problem of society sexualizing the illness. Equality, the campaign works to bring healthcare information to people with breasts, a group that is historically underserved by medical studies, practitioners, and systems. However, according to recent studies that discuss self-exams haven't been shown as effective in detecting cancer or improving survival in those who have cancer. Life cycle impact, the energy use and carbon production of digital materials are difficult to specify, and ongoing research is necessary. Digital materials are stored in servers that require electricity to maintain, and that electricity can come from sustainable or unsustainable sources. Right? So that's a lot of text, and I invite you to come back and look at it more on your own time. But what's important, at least right now, is that we managed to accomplish a few things in this label. Readers learn or are reminded that digital experiences are material experiences with an environmental impact. And because the label does not attend to a single point in time, readers become aware that the campaign has been censored and begin to think about the problem of sexualizing breast cancer. It's worth noting that our labels are always followed by an extended narrative that explain the core challenge the design works against, why the topic is design topic, and resources to continue reading. These resources are always a mix of reputable news sources, reports from government and non-governmental bodies, and academic articles and books. And the goal with this resource section is really to offer each visitor a short bibliography that reports the data included in the label, so we don't have to put a footnote up there, and helps them continue their investigations. So one of the values of this system is that we try to apply it to different types of designs to show, the fact that they're all valuable and interesting. I think we all have experience going into museums where the paintings are all well detailed, and then if you go into another side of the collection where there are bowls or chairs, you get labels that just say bowl or chair, and that communicates something to visitors. So here we can see this process at work with a really large building called Warwick Junction. So here, Warwick Junction, it's materials market stands, reused spaces, transportation infrastructure, wares for sale, and restaurants. Labor, well, it's a setting for informal and sanctioned work with ongoing efforts from multiple organizations to keep the area secure. Creators, people who work as non-sanctioned vendors, IEC Etafuni, Itakinvini municipality. And those are all different entities that are really core to the functioning of Warwick Junction. It's a transit hub with 9 markets that offer commuters and shoppers wares ranging from fresh produce and prepared foods to medicine, music, and textiles. The access, it's easily accessible. It's the primary transport hub for the city of Durban, South Africa, with more than 450,000 people passing through daily. What about equality? While imperfect, Warwick Junction allows historically marginalized groups the opportunity to work and earn a more durable livelihood than without the junction. So under apartheid planning, Warwick Junction was an entry point to an all-white city that allowed only Black people with work permits to pass. It was designed to discourage free-flowing movement, and Black informal traders faced harassment and displacement in the area. Activists and NGOs currently work to maintain the status of Warwick Junction as an open place of employment. And that life cycle impact. While more research is needed into the structures at and around the junction, how they are maintained, and what their relationships are with the market and transportation activities. One significant theme that runs through the entire study collection is the positive unplanned or unintended uses of design. Here we see Warwick Junction as an example of design that works well currently for the demographic it initially was used to diminish. We similarly present medicated abortion in this way, where mifepristone was a drug first approved for ulcer treatment, right, which was then a few years after reutilized by folks to have at-home medicated abortions. So it's not all about makers, right? We're also interested in how users reuse, reshape, and reclaim design. Finally, we'll turn to the menstrual cup. Spend a little bit more time on this because we have an example not only of the label that we use in our study collection here, but also how we have used the information developed for this label in other ways, which is my favorite part. So, materials. While it's a flexible medical grade silicone, latex, or thermoplastic isomer shaped like a bell, early menstrual cups were made of rubber. Labor. Here's another one of those ongoing research moments where it's necessary into the working conditions of current manufacturers. Creators. In 1932, a midwifery group, McClasson and Perkins, patented the menstrual cup in the USA for the first time. The actress Leona Chalmers patented a more commercial, viable version in 1937. And several patents from the past 8 years exist, each of which adjusts the shape or material of the cup. They're currently manufactured by people employed at the Tassaway, the Keeper, Moon Cup, and many others. Uses: a menstrual cup is a reusable product that collects period fluid when inserted into a vagina. Access: costs vary widely and anywhere from the equivalent of 7 USD cents to 47 USD dollars. Some NGOs exist that distribute menstrual cups at no cost to users. The quality menstrual cups allow people to hygienically and consistently manage periods across the globe and are particularly helpful for women who lack access to reliable waste processing facilities. Reliable period care is required for humans to maintain regular public life. And life cycle impact. Well, ongoing research into the energy used in manufacturing menstrual cups and the decreased waste generated when replacing tampons and pads with menstrual cups. Menstrual cups can last decades before they go into a landfill, and blood collected in menstrual cups can be used to fertilize plants in some situations. You'll notice here and in the Swedish Cancer Society's labels that we do make an effort to be as inclusive and respectful as possible when speaking about bodies and individuals. We don't want to make any assumptions or reinforce harmful norms. So, like I said, in general, these 3 labels and the framework they result from can be considered kind of the anchor of our research practice at M21D. And they're not the only style though, so I'm going to show you another version of a label for this menstrual cup. If you see in this image, it's on display on the left side of the image. So at a recent pop-up exhibition at Dutch Design Week, we were able to present a few pedestals which we titled Out of Place and Time, Objects from Our 21st Century Ancestors. And this pop-up exhibition highlighted a rather experimental approach that we're working on. Here we looked at everyday objects from the perspective of the 22nd century. So it was a narrative-heavy project with an introductory panel that did a lot of work to explain that in 2104, researchers from the Museum of 21st Century Design collected a study of artifacts discovered at excavation sites around the Netherlands, And some of those artifacts were a Nokia 1100 mobile phone, an LED light bulb, a rubber duck, and a menstrual cup. Each object's label relied on substantial research, and we wanted to present it in a whimsical form. So, for example, the menstrual cup stated, researchers for the Museum of 21st Century Design unearthed this object in 2104 from a boat wreck in Maastricht. We are humbled to encounter such an important personal object, a design still used today. The bell-shaped device made of soft and pliable material is recognized as a menstrual fluid collection cup. These cups likely help people with uteruses protect their health when access to alternatives faltered during the Great Collapse of 2050. Such cups contributed to the collective good by enabling users to participate consistently in public life. Just as today, the design helped ensure equal contribution in terms of ideas and influence, an essential condition when humanity needs every hand. Our approach really is based on the idea that decontextualizing quotidian objects helps people see their everyday objects from a new perspective. Context obscures the social and environmental impact of these things that we have around us every day. And the location of an object's presentation and the marketing surrounding it establish layered dominant narratives that habit and familiarity protect. This shield obscures an object's effects on people and places that originate in its materials, how it was manufactured and by whom, and how it is used and by whom. To counter these effects, users must discover methods for recontextualizing the objects and investigating their physical forms within novel frameworks. So here we're playing with the future to offer an engaging way to do that. As we've seen, using labels to answer questions about impact requires unconventional research, flexibility, and presentation, and sometimes recontextualization, that imagination on the viewer's part. The framework used to do this relies on a conception of labels and a definition of description that acknowledges the inherent subjectivity in the art of describing. As Michael Freed, Svetlana Alpers, and others have so persuasively explained, people choose to elevate aspects of objects that help them build a narrative, an interpretation, or an argument. No description, no label is neutral or detached, because descriptions only exist within an agenda, and that agenda contributes meaning through context. All labels, therefore, involve the presence of the person or institution responsible for it. M21D takes that responsibility very seriously. It recognizes that it too, or that we too, produce labels embedded with the agendas of our own. We consider this social position as, the quote-unquote describers of privilege that most do not receive. And this recognition brings freedom of choice. We choose to describe the aspects of objects and design that indicate how their existence impact people and places, which is what our visitors find most engaging anyway. The motivation to engage explicitly directs how and what we describe. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much. We do have a few questions. So the first question is from a participant who is curious to hear more about M21D's strategies for long-term preservation of their collections, and perhaps a bit about the carbon footprint of digital preservation.
Yeah, that's super tricky. And I've spent a lot of time talking to people who know more about this than I do. Like I said, we don't attempt to conserve any objects. That's really not what we feel like is our calling in the landscape of institutions. But as far as recording or preserving the digital life, it's something that we do think about a lot, because like I mentioned, we talk a lot about the Nokia 1100 phone, because it's the phone that's been sold and purchased the most in the world in the history of phones, including iPhones. And it is also one of the best handheld communication devices as far as battery life goes, and as far as minimal impact on the earth. Of course, there is still a significant impact, but it's less than others. And so we do think a lot about, all right, well, how do we talk about this? How do we record maybe screen grabs or descriptions of the battery life or descriptions of use or SMS applications and things like that? We don't have great answers for you, but we're thinking a lot about it. So if you have answers, let me know.
Great, thanks. Our next question is a bit of practical information. Do you have preset or standard components for each section that you can assemble to come up with the full definition of the label? For instance, is the life cycle definition for cancerfonden similar to other labels that involve digital media?
Yeah, thanks, John. We do try to maintain, so we ask the same questions of each design. But yeah, sometimes the response to those questions are different based on the media or on the entity, on the design. And really what we want to know is this life cycle, like what does it mean to have engaged and used resources and energy to make this thing? What types of like energy and resources are used to maintain it? And then does it have an end? Does it have a planned end? Or what happens to it after it inevitably ends? And so obviously those are going to be different specific questions for something like a digital campaign than it is for like Warwick Junction, which is metal and wood and concrete. But ultimately we want to know the same thing, kind of what is the full life cycle, what is the full impact of this thing, whether it's easy to define or not.
Great, thank you. We have a follow-up to the first question. Very curious about your collecting policy. How do you decide what to acquire for your collection, and are there any copyright concerns?
Well, there's always copyright concerns. But I'll answer the first question first. So we have a management board and an advisory board, and then there's only 3 of us on staff. So together there's about 15 of us, folks who come from a whole lot of different walks of life, folks who have a range of expertise. Like we do have folks who are in the technology world who I get to go to when I'm trying to understand new topics in digital development. But all that to say, we typically come together and have a long conversation about what is currently represented in our study collection and what do we need to see more of. And we have like a long-term planning to try and, as best we can, cover different types of design, cover different challenges that we're experiencing today in 2023, and different ways of responding. We're also interested in knowing where those ideas come from and where they are generated and for what communities they're designed for. And so those are all questions taken into consideration. So we kind of set up a long-term plan and check in as we go. Oh, but as far as copyright interest, so we have a statement somewhere on the website that says we are not here to endorse or discredit any sort of any design. We're not an advertising partner of anyone. And we also are really careful about the images we use because the images are, in place of the actual physical object that one would collect.
Certainly sounds like a lot to navigate, but
yeah.
So we have 2 more questions in about 2 more minutes. So I'll give you the first. Would you ever or have you considered transforming the label data as you have it populated through your online collection as linked open data, populating Wikidata knowledge graphs, for example?
Yeah, we've started having conversations about what exactly we want to do with this information. It's great that folks are coming to the website and are experiencing it there. And it's lovely that it becomes this kind of foundation for these other types of exhibitions that we do. But we do want to be able to make it more available. So we're open to anything and everything. We don't have a specific plan yet.
Okay, and the last question. I'm curious to hear about labeling approaches that might be inspirational to this thinking, such as nutritional labels for foods. Also, it'd be interesting to explore a bit the differences in labeling when it comes to recording a design's intention versus its impact.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about foods and nutrition labels. There's been a couple companies, I think Oatly did this, where instead of just telling you what is in the product as far as nutrition goes, but also the carbon footprint of the products that you're consuming. And so this expansion of what it actually means to have a label and what should be in that label on food products. And so we're excited about that idea and about taking it forward and working with other companies or other manufacturers to say, all right, if we want to inform consumers, let's not just inform them on the things that they are expecting to know, but also the things that are really important for future generations to know.
Well, thank you so much for another really engaging and thought-provoking session, Kiersten. We appreciate it, and we appreciate all the great questions that came in. We'll take a brief break now and come back for the next session at 1:30 Eastern time, so in 30 minutes, wherever you are in the world.
Thanks so much.